Our sponsor for today's podcast is Lynn Junk Removal. They are a locally owned business in Northwest Ohio with competitive prices and friendly service. They currently serve Northwest Ohio and Northeast Indiana. Some services they do are demolition, moving, and junk removal. You can call or text at 419-230-8418 for an estimate or any questions. We'd like to thank Lynn Junk Removal for being a sponsor.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Flagrant Foul Fridays podcast. This podcast is a sports podcast, and I'm one of your hosts, Christian. And with me today is my second host, Nick. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Nick. I work as a press operator at a factory at the moment. My favorite teams are the Seattle Seahawks, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Growing up, my dad, I knew he played basketball in high school, and my parents told me he played for the Lancers. Well, I got a new NBA game, and I thought the Lakers were the Lancers. So I started playing with them, and they became my favorite team that way. Kind of a weird story. Seattle Seahawks, another way of me becoming a fan is weird. I started playing Madden 11, and I just like their colors, so I picked that team. They've just been my favorite team ever since. And growing up in Ohio, obviously, the Buckeyes got to be my favorite football team. I grew up into a family full of Buckeyes fans, so it kind of just stuck with me. Some sports I played in high school were soccer. I played that my junior and senior year. I also played soccer as a little kid, which kind of got me more interested into joining again in high school. I also bowled in high school, and I currently bowl in a league on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I really enjoy that, and we'll let you get to know Christian.
I believe I was the one that talked you into soccer, right?
Yeah, you talked me into getting back into soccer.
That's what I thought. Yeah, my name's Christian. I'm currently a senior in college. I am a biology and health science major. And when I'm at home for the summer, I work as a CNA and home health aide. Um, my favorite teams are also the Seahawks, Ohio State, and for basketball, it's actually Golden State. Uh, Ohio is pretty similar to Nick's story. Born and raised in Ohio. In fact, me and Nick were born in the same town. That's how we know each other. The Seahawks, really was just when I started to really get into football. I was a really big fan of Marshawn Lynch, and the Seahawks were doing really good around that time. So, what better time to become a fan? And, I stuck with them ever since. And then the Warriors is a pretty similar story. Big fan of Steph Curry, and I never really liked LeBron. I like him more now than I used to. So, I didn't want to pick the Cavs. So, of course, I had to go with the Warriors. And again, I stuck with them ever since. So, you can't say I'm a bandwagon because I've stuck with them both for what, 10 years now, probably? Like, yeah, yeah, 10 years or so. In high school, I played soccer for 3 years. I was a captain at one point. I did track. Um, my go-to was kind of like hurdles. That was my specialty, I suppose. And then I did football through middle school. So, Nick, I think we should talk about maybe how we met, just so the fans kind of know.
We, like Christian said, we were born in the same town, so we went to the same schools together. And I believe, was it third grade? Because I think he went to a different elementary
Uh,
school until
I
he
think it was kindergarten, wasn't it?
was it? I can't remember. I get you mixed up with somebody else.
Yeah, I think we were in each other's kindergarten class because I remember um, saying something one time and then you got me sent to the office because of it, and
Oh
I'll
yeah,
never live that down. That might be
yeah, I
like the only
remember
time
that.
I've ever gotten major trouble at school, so it's kind of your fault.
Yeah,
Um, And then I think we weren't in each other's classes for like first or second grade probably. And then definitely through middle school and high school, we started having a lot of classes together, I would say.
And I would say with us being in football uh, in middle school, that really got us closer together and we hung out a lot.
Yeah, I think around middle school, we kind of bonded over the Seahawks a bit. And then I think high school is when we really started getting close. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd say once we hit high school, we are probably at our peak.
Yeah. All right. So I think now we should probably explain a bit about what to expect with this show. Um, so why don't you talk about kind of what we're going to cover every week, Nick?
So we plan on covering a couple different specific sports. This week, it just so happens to be college football, the NFL, and the NBA. This could change depending on the sports season because obviously football won't be in the spring and the summer, and basketball won't be until the later part of fall, and college football won't be in the spring or summer either. And we are willing to take suggestions if people want to hear about another sport for us to cover. We also have a special segment.
We're trying to cover sports that we actually follow. So, like you said, we will take suggestions, but I feel like we're going to get the most out of this podcast if we cover things that we actually know about and are passionate about. So that's why we don't have things on here like golf or whatever. Like, we might like golf, but we don't watch it enough to probably cover as much as we should. And but again, that's subject to change. Like, for example, I used to really be into soccer, um, so I could easily see us covering that a bit more in the future.
I've been following hockey a little more, so I could see us maybe integrating hockey a little bit.
Right. Yep. And then why don't you talk about the special segment?
So every week we plan on having a special segment. This week's special segment is actually something that we wanted to do for fun. We each created a NBA team based off of a funny name, and it didn't have to be skill based. So we could have took a guy who literally sat the bench and got a couple reps in during a game, and he could have had 0 points averaged in his career, but he had a funny name, so he entered the starting lineup.
Yep. So we each created our own starting lineup with a six man and then a coach. And it's not really a competition or anything, but if you guys want to let us know in the comments who you think's team is funnier or would actually win in a game, feel free to. We just thought it would be a fun way to kind of start the podcast. So, one thing to note is that we plan on recording on Wednesdays as of right now. So that means that anything that happens on Thursdays and Fridays will be covered the next week. However, we're going to upload on Fridays. So that might mean if certain big news things don't get covered, it will most likely be in the next episode. So if a couple things feel left out, that's probably why. Um, one other thing to note is that next week we will have a special episode based on Thanksgiving. So it's probably going to be a little bit shorter than normal. Um, but it's definitely going to be fun. So we're probably not going to cover any news that week. So that means there's going to be about a week of no news, and then we'll probably catch you up on the week after that. We also plan on having special guests. Um, we might even include listeners. So if you would like to be involved, leave a comment and we'll reach out to you if we feel like we want a special guest. And then again, we are still learning, so bear with us. There might be a few technical issues, um, but we're gonna learn as we go and hopefully make this podcast as fun and accurate at reporting the news as possible. So, with that being said, we are now going to move into our first segment, which is college football. So, the first thing I'd like to talk about is the AP Top 25 football poll. There's not a lot to report this week. The big changes are that Alabama dropped 6 spots and is now in 10th, and Texas dropped 7 spots and is now 17th. Nick, do you have any thoughts about the poll?
Um, One thing I would like to point out is there's four new teams in the poll this week. Houston at 25, Tulane at 24, Missouri at 23, and North Texas at 22. Um, my opinion personally about the poll is I don't know about Texas being above Michigan. I know Michigan had a rough week against Northwestern, but Texas being 7-3 just doesn't sit well with me being above 8-2 Michigan team. Even being a Buckeyes fan, I still think Michigan should be over Texas.
Yeah, but to be fair, one of their losses was against the number one team. So, in some sense, you could argue that shouldn't even count as a loss in their AP poll.
Yeah, that's true. And they did have a good win over Oklahoma when they were ranked up higher.
I will say they seem better than at the start of the season, but they clearly are still showing holes in their team. So we'll see if they get that worked out come playoff time.
One other thing I do want to note is Alabama. I know they've been a favorite, but I honestly don't see them making it super far this year. I mean, I just don't see any sign of light at the end of the tunnel for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. He had a rough season last year. He's doing okay this year, but yeah, I just don't see them doing much this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But with a team like that, they could start playing really well out of nowhere. So we'll just have to wait
Hmm.
and see, I suppose.
Yeah, Alabama's usually a pretty good team, pretty tough. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens
Yeah.
come playoff time.
And honestly, as an Ohio State fan, I think I would rather play some of these like other teams than like Alabama and Georgia. I know
Hmm.
that that's some of the possibilities for the current playoffs right now. But obviously that's subject to change with the conference championships and everything. So the next thing is Heisman candidates. I'll let you talk about that, Nick.
Starting off with the Heisman candidates, we got Fernando Mendoza at number one. I think he looks pretty good. I mean, he had a shaky game against Penn State, but they ended up pulling out in the end. I really like that catch against Penn State actually, and then they had a good game last week. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I
that
could
that
see him
might be
top
one of the
one.
craziest catches.
Yeah, I could see
That
him
might be one of the
being one or
craziest catches
two.
I've ever seen.
Yeah, that and that JSN catch when he got that. Who was it? Wisconsin, I think it was,
Yeah,
or Nebraska, one of the
very,
two.
very reminiscent of that. That was his first career touchdown at Ohio State, wasn't it?
I have no idea.
I believe it was. So who's at our number two spot?
At our number two spot, we have uh, Julian Sayin. This one says Marcel
Actually, I
Reed.
believe it's Marcel Reed.
This one says Marcel Reed, but I believe I saw that Julian Sayin is number two.
He might have dropped actually after this week, but either way, it's probably two or three is interchangeable.
Anyway, Marcel Reed. I mean, Texas A&M. They've been winning. They're 10-0 right now, I believe, or 11-0, and they've had some close wins, but people are saying that that's just how good the SEC is. The bottom teams are competitive with the top teams.
Yeah, I think overall they haven't had a super hard schedule though. Um, but then again, I don't think Ohio State has either. But there's no predicting that like Penn State is gonna be terrible. So I don't know. It is what it is.
Also, something to note: if the Aggies finish the regular season undefeated, it would be the first time since 1994 that they finished above 10-0-1.
Pretty cool. So who's our number three, Julian?
Yep, Julian Saint.
Honestly, that seems fair. I think he shows glimpses of being the Heisman favorite, but sometimes he just I don't know. It's weird. He has some of the best accuracy stats in terms of completion percentage of any QB ever, but in terms of like total yards and touchdowns, it's nothing like too crazy. But I also think Ohio State is being a little conservative, perhaps just trying to rest their players and stuff. So I don't know.
That if Ohio State actually continues their play calling rate, they could potentially give themselves per se a extra bye week because of how well they're resting their players on limited plays.
Yeah, I did hear about that, which is interesting because they haven't really had any like huge blowout wins. Like I think they won 70-0 against Grambling, but everything else has been within maybe 30 or 40 points if it was a blowout. So I don't know. Number four, Ty Simpson. I don't know much about him to be honest, but I know Alabama in general has had their ups and downs this season.
I've watched a few of their games. I mean, they've been close. I mean, he's been a pretty reliable quarterback for Alabama. He's I don't see him as like a Tua or a Jalen Hurts level player, but I mean, he's good for what they need. I mean, he's a good fit for their team.
Yeah, and who's our number five?
Diego Pavia for Vanderbilt. Honestly, Diego's had a good season. I think his season last year might have been better just because it really sparked him as a player for everybody to watch for. This year, I haven't heard as much about Diego as I did last year.
Yeah, I would agree. Although I will say Vanderbilt as a whole have been looking very good this year, which is almost crazy to say when you consider how usually they do.
Yeah, like a few years ago, they didn't have a good record, and then I could see them being a maybe not a powerhouse program, but definitely a top program.
Yeah, I could see them end up being like Penn State, where they consistently get 9 or 10 wins every season, but then they maybe lose out to those Alabamas or Georgias.
Right. Yeah, I could see that too.
All right, let's move on to some other news within college football. So Michigan State has had 14 wins from 2022 to 2024 vacated due to recruitment violations. Now, I haven't looked into this much, but this is quite interesting to me, especially when you consider the fact about how Michigan earlier this year, um, had the investigations complete, and a lot of people argued that they kind of got away with a lot.
Yeah, I saw that. Ohio State, they got 12 wins vacated back in, I think it was 2012, whenever that was. And now Michigan State getting their wins vacated. And I saw a lot of people were arguing that, you know, Michigan State They may have won 14 games, but that's over like 3 seasons. Compared to Michigan, they made it to the national championship and won the championship.
Do you think it matters that Michigan was a um, play calling scandal rather than recruiting?
Um, I,
Because I know they said they didn't want to penalize the players.
right, and then in this instance, it involved the players.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to rules like this, it's really tough, I think, to implement a fair punishment. And yeah, I don't know. I I personally think Michigan should have maybe had a tougher punishment. I don't know if that looks like a playoff ban, although again, that kind of punishes people that weren't involved. I don't know.
The people that were involved did get their punishments, like Connor Stallions and Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, I guess what I really wish is I just wish it was a bit more consistent, where it's like if you're going to break the rules within these parameters, like this is the result. And if that's
Right.
vacated wins, then that's vacated wins.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the current problem is there's not a lot of consistency right now with the punishments. But I don't know. It is what it is. Um, Next thing is currently the Big Ten championship could be between the 1 and 2 seed. I've looked it up, and this is a fairly rare occurrence, although it has happened. I think the last time was around 2023, I want to say. I think it was Georgia, Bama, maybe.
I think you're right.
But I think that's interesting, and the fact that it's a Big Ten team is really interesting.
Yeah, the Big Ten. I hear a lot of people talking bad about the Big Ten being a lower tier powerhouse program because of their lower teams like Purdue and Rutgers. But it's pretty cool to see two Big Ten teams in the top two. And earlier this season, we saw like 4 or 5 in the top 10 for 1 week.
Yeah, I think. I mean, you can make the argument that Ohio State and Indiana had pretty easy schedules this year, but I think regardless, it's still pretty cool to see them at 1 and 2.
Honestly, I think they both deserve to be at 1 and 2 regardless of their schedules. I mean, they've showed promise. Indiana, they blew out Illinois. They were a ranked team, although they're not ranked anymore. Ohio State, their defense has looked immaculate this season. One of the best defensive seasons in college football history.
Yeah. And, kind of on that note, if Ohio State does play Indiana in the Big Ten championship and Ohio State wins, do you think then Texas A&M takes the 2 seed, assuming they don't lose?
About this, but I don't remember. I think the seeds stay the same after the Big Ten championship, the Big 12 championship, all those championship games. I believe the seeding stays the same. I think only
Okay.
the regular
I
season
think
affects it.
yeah, I think I vaguely remember that, but it's going to be in the back of the minds of the voters, I think, regardless, right? So that could
Yeah,
would that
I
affect
think
the playoff picture?
I don't see Indiana getting taken out of the playoff picture, but I don't know how they would work the first round buys in. If they would go back, like put Indiana back 4 spots, put them outside the first round bye since they lost in the Big Ten championship, or Ohio State, vice versa. And I think it also depends on if it's a blowout or if it's a close game. Like if it's a blowout, I could see them dropping them 5, 6, 7 spots. But if it's a close game, they may still get a first round bye. Who knows?
Right. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Um, What else? Oh, Michigan is reported to potentially be leaving the Big Ten to become an independent program when the media rights deal expires in 2036. Yeah, that's crazy to me,
I
honestly.
mean, I've only ever known Big Ten or Michigan to be a Big Ten program. In my opinion, I've heard this from other people. I mean, I'm kind of on the edge, but I don't know if independent programs should be allowed to be in the playoffs because these other teams they have to pay into their conference some of the money they win from the playoffs, whereas the independent programs they keep all the money.
Yeah. Well, I I don't know. I think there's pros and cons. I do hope that they somehow implement a schedule thing where they still play Ohio State every year.
So that they still will play Ohio State unless Ohio State backs out or they back out. But I don't know because that's a conference game. So they're going to be down a conference game. So they'd have to either play Michigan earlier in the season if they want to keep that rivalry going, or they're going to have to schedule a conference game a week earlier and have Michigan at Thanksgiving like they always do.
Yeah, if it's earlier in the year, that's just gonna feel weird. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Hmm.
But it is certainly something worth keeping up to date with, I suppose. Okay, now let's cover some of the games, and I think we can kind of just go through this quickly.
Friday night, Clemson played Louisville, and Clemson ended up coming out on top against Louisville. They won 20-19. They ended up winning off of a touchdown in the fourth quarter, and Louisville couldn't come back and score. So I guess
And
we saw that Louisville
Louisville
dropped
was
out.
ranked
Yeah,
20, right?
Louisville was 20, and they dropped out of the top 25.
Yep.
And then our next game, we got number 18 Michigan versus Northwestern. I talked about a little bit earlier with them having that close game. They won 24-22 off of a last second field goal. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Them having that close game, almost losing.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's you definitely are worried, I feel like, as a Michigan fan. Um, but it was at Wrigley Field. I don't know if that affected it somehow. You know, small changes like that can mess with the players and how they play, so who knows? Um, perhaps Northwestern was just really motivated because of it, who knows? But it's definitely a good sign, I suppose, for the Ohio State Michigan game.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a little scary. I know I heard that Bryce Underwood didn't play the best, but he also, like you said, they're playing at a non-football stadium. So, I mean, you got probably more chance of win coming into the stadium, which could come into factor. The players not used to all the extra draft and everything.
The ground might have been really hard to play on, I don't know.
That's true. I don't know the difference
I
between
will say
baseball
though, it
fields.
it did look pretty cool.
Yep.
And it was kind of ironic they had a walk-off field goal, kind of like a walk-off home run.
Yeah.
All right, and the next game, number 3 Texas A&M beat South Carolina 31 to 30 after being down 30 to 3 at one point. That is insane to me.
I don't know what the biggest comeback is or what the furthest down a team has been in the top rankings to come back and beat an unranked team. But I feel like that's got to be close to something that hasn't happened before. I honestly thought Texas A&M was just going to lose that game. And then South Carolina, they just
Yeah,
couldn't get anything going. Obviously, they went on a 28 to nothing run and won the game.
right. Well, and a lot of good teams do really bad in the first half, so that's not too surprising. But to go down that much and come back, I mean, that's just crazy. They really locked in. But I also think South Carolina is a lot better than people give them credit for. I think they're pretty consistently a decent team in the SEC. I mean, considering how dominant some of those teams are that they have to play. So,
Yeah, I think them coming back kind of puts a thought in people's minds for playoff time. They could go down against any team, and they came back down 27 points and beat South Carolina. You think what could they do if they were down 14 to nothing against Georgia or Indiana, Ohio State?
right. I think there's also the argument though that now they have experience with being down, so that could actually benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, I agree.
Next game we have Navy defeating number 24 South Florida 41 to 38. Uh, Before this game, South Florida achieved their first ranking appearance since 1959, and unfortunately, they are no longer ranked.
I would also like to note it was their first ever college football playoff ranking appearance. So that's like the 2014 ranking up until now.
Hmm. Well, hopefully they can bounce back next year, I suppose. Now we got Arizona upsetting number 25 Cincinnati 30 to 24. Uh, I don't want to say that's that surprising. I think Arizona's pretty decent, and Cincinnati is a very hit or miss team.
I mean, Cincinnati, they were ranked earlier this year. They looked like a decent program. I mean, they didn't really play many people that were good. They played, I believe it was Utah. They played Utah, and Utah beat them. I mean, I want to see Cincinnati get back in the playoffs again. I think they'd be cool. But obviously, it's not going to happen this year after losing against Arizona.
Yeah. And our last game update is that number 16 Georgia Tech beat Boston College 36 to 34 after being down 28 to 17 at the start of the fourth quarter. I'm honestly really happy that they're been ranked all season pretty much because Georgia Tech has been known to being one of those teams that upsets good teams early in the season, but then they fall apart. But I think the fact that they've been ranked since I think about the third week, I want to say. I think that's really impressive.
Georgia Tech, they're usually the team that can get the upsets, but they can't stay consistent and make it into the top 25 or stay in the top 25. But, I mean, they lost and they dropped to 16, and then they were able to redeem themselves and beat Boston College. I don't know if they're going to be a playoff team per se or going to win a playoff game, but it's still pretty cool to see them growing.
Yeah, I definitely expect them to maybe get some good recruits starting this year. All right, we kind of have to do our duty as Ohio State fans to cover Ohio State specifically. And the first thing I would like to talk about is that um, Julian Sang was struggling to execute without Tate and Smith. It seemed like his accuracy was a bit off, but it's one of those things where you don't know if it's the quarterback's fault or the wide receiver's fault. Because, for example, Sayan's really good at throwing to the back shoulder and just giving him a high pass. But if you don't have like a five-star receiver that knows how to make that play, they might just completely miss the throw. And so I think that might have been the case with some of his throws that, you know, were incomplete, but I also think some of them were maybe just bad reads. What are your thoughts?
I think part of it has to do with him not having experience with his receivers and his receivers not having experience with him. With Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, they've been starting all season. Obviously, Tate didn't play last week, and now Smith didn't play this past weekend. He's got to play with these new receivers that are second stringers. They're not used to getting playing time unless
Right.
they're up by
Well,
35 or so.
Smith played for a little bit this weekend, but it came out.
Yeah, but I think they'll grow as they get the feel because they didn't really play much together besides in practice, so they didn't really have game speed plays.
Well, I'm hoping that this week at practice, they practice a bit more with those receivers because I do think probably 80% of it was just a lack of practice between them, like a connection almost.
Yeah,
Um, I, so, and like I wouldn't even throw the blame on the receivers necessarily. I think that's just an issue,
I don't.
as
I don't
a
think it's.
whole.
Yeah, I don't think it's the receivers. I just think it's they don't have that connection and bond like Tate, Smith, and Sane have because they've been playing together all
Right.
season.
Yeah, and I believe Fans averaging what, like a 80% completion rating or something like that?
Yeah, I believe it's around there.
And I believe this week, with him looking bad, it only dropped to like 75 or something. So it shouldn't really hurt his average much. So, I'm not too worried about it. It's something that we're just have to watch and see. Hopefully, Tate and Smith can be healthy by the Michigan game, though.
Yeah, I did see a lot of fans talking about that Smith injury. They're saying that I know they said something about him coming back for Rutgers, and I saw a bunch of fans saying, let's sit him until Michigan. Let's sit him till the Big Ten championship. Let's, give him time to rest. Don't put him in too early if because we don't really need him against Rutgers. I think they can win without Tate and Smith against Rutgers.
I would agree. And with the new NFL rules, I think he's going to stay at Ohio State for at least 1, 2 more years, right?
I know he mentioned that he did want to stay a couple years, and he wanted to try to win a couple more national championships with the team, which that'd be cool if they went back to back. They'd be the first back to back team in the new college football playoff system.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the NFL changed how young you can be, right?
I did not
Like, I
see
think
that.
you have to be, I think it's a lot, like, you can't be as young as you used to. Like, I think you have to be a junior or a soft, I don't know.
I know it used to be junior. I don't know if it still is. I didn't see anything about a change.
Okay, maybe I'm misremembering, but either way, player safety comes first, so yeah.
I think I'd rather see players stay until their junior year anyway, because they develop. That's where they develop in college, and if they go too early into the NFL, they can jeopardize their career, or they could even jeopardize themselves into a career-ending injury.
Yeah. Another really interesting thing from this week was that Ohio State got their first kick return since 2010, and it was the first 100-yard return since 2005's Ted Ginn Jr.
For it to be the first 100-yard kickoff return since 2005, Ted Ginn Jr. is a good kickoff return man.
I mean, when you think of kickoff returns, like Ted Ginn is the guy.
I'd say between him and Devin Hester, yeah.
The 100-yard thing doesn't surprise me too much, but I think the fact that we haven't had any kick returns in 15 years is kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, when you think about it, you got to run the whole length of the field. You got to avoid 11 different defenders. Hope you guys are blocking for you. You got a bunch of different things that could go wrong, and then you got things that could go right. And that happened Saturday. They were able to get their first kickoff return.
And then the last thing is that Ohio State is reported to be getting three new number one recruits: a receiver, a defensive lineman, and a corner.
Yeah, I know. Um, Obviously, that receiver is Chris Henry Jr. I mean, I've seen some highlights of his. He looks like a really good receiver. I think he'll fit the Ohio State receiving room pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that our defense seems to be getting better every year, and now we're getting even better defenders. And then there's obviously no shortage of wide receivers.
I think
So
having
yeah,
Brian,
a bright future ahead.
I think having Brian Hartline really helps Ohio State because of the development he has with the receivers. People want to come and learn from him.
You know, I was worried going into this year, changing our offensive and defensive coordinator with a new quarterback. That's so many variables. And
Yeah,
yet it all seems to be working pretty well. So we just have a couple more things for college football and then we will move on to the NFL. So Katron Allen, I think that's how you say his name, is 139 rushing yards away from becoming Penn State's all-time leading rusher. That's a bit crazy to me because I don't feel like he gets talked about much.
we don't hear about him much. And usually, when you think of a running back at Penn State, you think of Nick Singleton. He's always talked about. They're always announcing his name during the
Or
game. I don't.
Saquon, right?
Yeah, Saquon. He's probably one of their best backs of all time.
Um, is he a senior? I would assume he's probably pretty old, right?
I believe he's a senior. And one other thing to note is he's sharing snaps with Nick Singleton, so that's pretty impressive.
That's true. So even though he has played longer than some of their best running backs historically, he's probably getting about the same amount of snaps.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. It'll be cool to see if he breaks that. Fernando Mendoza set Indiana's single season touchdown record with 30 touchdowns. That's impressive.
To me, that kind of seems a little low of a record, but I mean, props to him for breaking that.
I just think Indiana probably historically has either had a good running game or just not very good quarterbacks. All right, last thing is we're going to briefly talk about the college football playoffs. We got Tulane and Texas Tech. The winner of that will play Georgia. And then Notre Dame, Oklahoma. Winner of that plays Ohio State. Miami, Ole Miss. Winner of that plays Texas A&M. And then Alabama, Oregon plays Indiana. So far, this seems like a very interesting uh, playoff bracket. But I will note that I feel like this is likely to change. Um, so I don't think there's a lot to talk about. If it ends up being like that, though, it will be fun to see. We could have Notre Dame versus Ohio State very early, which would be an interesting rematch. Um, and that means Ohio State could play Indiana in the national championship, which is crazy to say.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana, they'd be playing either Oregon or Alabama, but I could see Indiana beating Oregon again. So, I mean, you got two chances to have a Big Ten team in the national championship.
Yeah. It's still weird to me that Oregon's in the Big Ten. Like it hasn't quite synced in. But I'm happy. I think more competition in the Big Ten is going to be good.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a big fan of them adding West teams to mainly Eastern Conference.
Yeah. You think they would add someone a bit closer, but it is what it is. And like we've had a long history with like the Rose Bowl. So it's not like it's crazy, to be playing out there.
One thing I do want to note is BYU and Utah are the first teams out, with BYU being ranked at 11, and they're getting their place taken by Miami. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, BYU does really good every year, but they always lose like the one important game, I feel like. I don't know.
Then Utah getting their spot taken by Tulane, with Tulane being ranked at 24. Utah's looked good this season. I don't know. And with Tulane's coach, he doesn't know if his team is even a good team. He's surprised they made it to the top 25.
Yeah, I mean, it is looking more and more like March Madness. Like anyone can make it.
I hope we eventually get a team that does get a March Madness run.
Yeah, and I think if they continue to expand the playoffs like they plan on, I think we will see that one day. Now we're gonna move on to the NFL, and fair warning, I have not really followed the NFL closely in a couple years, so I'll kind of let Nick take the lead here, and I'll chime in as much as I can.
So, starting with Thursday night football, we had the Patriots versus the Jets. One thing to note of that game that I found something worth noting is Travion Henderson scored 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing and 1 receiving.
Is anyone surprised that the game when they finally get his letters the right size on the back of his jersey, he goes off? I'm just saying.
I believe he had a good game before that too, but yeah, they got this.
Well, this is probably his best game.
Did you hear anything about that? Was it like an accident or?
I don't know. It
Because
might have
that's
just
weird.
been long. I'm sure there's longer names though. I don't know.
Yeah, you would think they'd fit it to the back of the jersey though, like everybody else.
Yeah, I didn't even know anything about it till I saw that. It's just it had really tiny letters and then they made it normal. So that's odd.
All right, so moving on to Sunday football. The first game we're going to talk about is the Rams and Seahawks. Obviously, as Seahawks fans, we're probably going to talk a little bit more about those games because I usually pay more attention to those games than I do the other ones. So the Rams beat the Seahawks this weekend. Rams went up to first in the NFC West. They won on a near game-winning drive. Seattle had a 61-yard field goal. It fell short. Honestly, I think they could have had more time if they weren't throwing the ball in the middle of the field. They only had one timeout left. I don't know why they were doing that. In my opinion, they should have been throwing it to the outside. Um, Another thing to note: Sam Darnold had 4 interceptions.
Yeah, I was just about to say that the fact the game was that close with 4 interceptions really speaks to how good the defense was. Um, and also, I don't know if you saw it, the Rams had one of the greatest punts I have ever seen.
Barely getting it inside the 1 yard line.
Yeah, and that was, I think, towards the end of the game. So, like, if we're gonna talk about like punts under pressure, like that's the one. So shout out to that punter.
Yeah, that was that punt lead and ended that game-winning drive. So they started on the 1 yard line during that game-winning drive. Another thing I wanted to note, JSN had another 100 plus yard game, and he becomes the first player in Super Bowl era to have at least 75 receiving yards a game in each of his first 10 games of a season.
Yeah, he's having a crazy year. And I believe he is still on pace to beat the receiving yard record that Calvin Johnson holds, correct?
Yeah, I believe he's still on pace. I mean, he may have some work to do in order to get there. I mean, if he's even trying to break the record, he might not even be focusing on trying to break the record.
You know, I knew when we drafted him as an Ohio State fan that he would be a big pickup, but he's starting to look like potentially one of the biggest steals in the NFL draft history.
I I was really happy we drafted him. I knew his potential from, like you said, watching him at Ohio State. We were kind of skeptical about his play. We didn't know because he wasn't a number one receiver. He was like the backup receiver.
He's small.
Hmm.
He's small also.
Anyway, uh, Devontae Adams was able to get his 1,000th career catch and his seventh season with 10 touchdowns. He actually got his 1,000th career catch and that touchdown on the same play. So I mean, Devontae Adams, he's a pretty good receiver. I could see him going down as one of the best receivers of all time. Maybe not top five, but I could see him being top 10 when he's all said and done.
Yeah. And I feel like he didn't really get talked about early in his career.
Next, we got the Cardinals versus 49ers game. We have some pretty interesting stats, I thought. Michael Wilson, their wide receiver, he had 185 receiving yards. You don't really see that much. Um, and then Jacoby Brissett, he had 452 passing yards on 47 completions out of 57 attempts. And that was actually a franchise record for single game completions. Uh, Another record that the Cardinals set for their franchise is something you probably don't want to have a record beaten, but they had 17 penalties. That's the most penalties in a game in franchise history. And they tied the NFL record with 11 for most penalties in a half.
I think this kind of begs the question, is Kyler Murray the future of the Cardinals?
I don't know. I mean, he's out with an injury right now. The Cardinals, I mean, they haven't been playing good with him. They haven't been playing good without him. I mean, I feel like they're playing about the same if he's there or if he's not there.
Right. And I mean, this is only one game, but I think having that franchise record of completions and 452 passing yards, it kind of makes you wonder if, they just kind of let Jacoby roll a bit and then, maybe they draft another QB in the future. I don't know.
They should try rolling with Jacoby for a little bit because only having 10 incompletions on 57 attempts, it's nuts.
Yeah, that's insane. Okay, now we got the Bucks versus Bills. And we got Sean Tucker had 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 1 receiving. And then Josh Allen had 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns. Is it safe to say that Josh Allen is a one-man army?
He gets the job done whether his team is willing or not. I mean, I could see him being a top five MVP candidate, but I haven't really seen any of the MVP polls, so I don't know. But in my eyes, he's a top five at least for MVP. He's carrying the Bills. They've had their losses. I mean,
It's interesting. I believe every year he tends to be at the top of the leaderboard in terms of um, touchdowns and maybe even passing yards, or maybe total yards, because he does rush. But he also has some of the most interceptions of any quarterback.
receptions on Sunday. So, I mean, he had a rough start, and then he went off and he said, "You know what? I'm going to carry this team on my back. I'm going to bring 6 touchdowns to the table and bring us back and win this game."
Yeah, Honestly, he kind of reminds me of James Winston in terms of he
He
gets
gets
those
those
touchdowns
touchdowns
and
and
interceptions,
interceptions.
It's weird. All right. Next, we got the Falcons versus the Panthers. Michael Penix had a knee injury. I'm not sure how bad that was. Do you know?
um, I believe he's gonna be out for a little bit.
Okay.
Um,
Bryce Young had 448 yards, which is a franchise record for single game passing yards, and he also had 3 touchdowns. It's good to see Bryce Young do something good. Um, he's one of those quarterbacks that you have to wonder, is he as bad as what he actually is, or is it a team issue? Is he going to waste his prime on the Panthers? It's hard to say. I think he's good though.
I like to see the season from him. I mean, the Panthers are winning more games later on in this season. They're doing a little better. Granted, it was the Falcons, but I think Bryce Young took a little bit further step, and I think he could be a decent quarterback for the Panthers for the rest of the season and for as long as he's there.
Yeah.
And I think what really helps is that he has Tateroa McMillan. I mean, he got 130 receiving yards. It's good to have a threat on a team for a growing quarterback.
Yep. And they won in overtime with a field goal. So interesting. All right. So now we got a couple milestones. With 4 sacks against the Ravens, Myles Garrett becomes the first player in NFL history to have 6 consecutive seasons with at least 12 sacks. And he passes Lawrence Taylor, who had 5 seasons. He now has 7 total seasons with 12 sacks. That's insane. And honestly, I feel bad that he's been stuck on bad teams his whole career.
On one bad team, the Browns.
Yeah, that is a fair point. It is just one team.
Also, I saw that actually the leader is 11 total seasons with 12 sacks, so I believe he could probably break that record.
Yeah, I would agree. Honestly, I'd like to see the Seahawks get him.
I mean, they got a lot of money, so there's potential.
Yeah, I will say going into this season, I was kind of happy if we got like a 50% win rate this season. Because we have the highest cap space of any team, correct?
Yeah, one of the highest. I don't know about the highest.
A lot of that will probably go into signing some of these younger guys, unfortunately. But I do think we have a lot of potential trade options coming next season.
Yeah, I think they could definitely pick up some big names next season to help the team. Maybe make a good run in the playoffs. It'd be cool to see a good run in the playoffs this year with all that cap
Yeah.
space.
All right. And what's some of our other milestones?
Uh, so on Monday Night Football, Brock Bowers, he was sitting at 144 receptions, but he got 7 receptions on Monday, sitting him at 151. Brock broke Sam Laporta's record for most by a tight end in the first 2 career seasons, and Laporta had 146. Honestly, in my opinion, that's kind of surprising because the Raiders haven't been a good team, but Brock Bowers is able to still break records for them.
Every time I see Pete Carroll in a Raiders uniform, it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I I don't know how I feel about that, but I do like Mike McDonald as our coach.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, so our next milestone set by C.D. Lamb. He passed Des Bryant. C.D. Lamb was at 536. Des Bryant is at 531. He passed it for the third most receptions in Cowboys history. The only receivers ahead of him are Michael Irvin at 750 and Jason Witten at 1215. Um, and he's also 28 receptions behind Jarvis Landry for most receptions in the first 6 seasons of a player's career.
You know, when I think of a Cowboys wide receiver, I always think of Des Bryant. So the fact that he's already past that is kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, CD Lamb, obviously that second stat, he's been in the league less than 6 seasons or less than 7 seasons, and he already did what Des Bryant did in his career. That's pretty nuts.
Hopefully he can stay healthy and I want to say hopefully he can leave the Cowboys, but who knows? Maybe they'll finally win a Super Bowl. We got a couple injury updates. So Burrow, who has turf toe, is fully participating in team practice, but it's unknown if he will return this week. He will likely return for the Thanksgiving game against the Ravens. It's really sad to see Burrow get injured so often with how good he did in college. Not to mention, he took the Bengals to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think if he has a healthy season, I think he's top three MVP. I mean, he's a good quarterback. He's got weapons. I just hate to see that it can't stay healthy.
Is he the greatest Ohio State quarterback of all time?
I mean, really, no Ohio State quarterbacks have panned out in the NFL. Maybe CJ Stroud, but he's currently hurt and he's having somewhat of a down year.
Yeah. He's actually CJ's ruled out for the next game because he has a concussion. That's sad. CJ did really good his first 2 years, I thought. And then who was it that got injured? That receiver.
Uh, Nico Collins.
Yeah, and he was out. I think he's out for a whole year. That's it's unfortunate. They were making a playoff run last year.
Yeah, I think if that whole team's healthy, they're definitely a playoff contender and definitely could make a run in the playoffs.
All right, and now I think we're just briefly run through the next couple injuries. So Sanders could start, depending how fast Gabriel can get through concussion protocol. Jackson Dart out with a concussion will probably return against the Lions. Jaden Daniels is likely to be out for the rest of the year. Not to mention, there's really no reason to play him with the record they have. Josh Jacobs with a knee contusion did not practice, so it's unknown when he will return. And Kyler Murray is going to return for week 14. Like we talked about earlier, though, maybe that's not the best option. And our last news for the NFL is something I came across earlier, which was kind of interesting. Odell Beckham Jr. has been reinstated after a 6-game ban for violating performance enhancing drug policies back in 2024. He claimed that he was dealing with testosterone issues. Whether or not that's true, he still violated the drug policies. And he's currently a free agent at the age of 33. What are your thoughts on this, Nick?
I don't know if anybody would really want him with being an older receiver. I mean, he was really good in his prime, but as a general manager, I don't see myself picking him up.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think he's also been known to have some locker room issues with the players. So honestly, he's looking like a liability in more than one way. I did not know anything about this ban though, so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it.
All right, and now we are going to move on to the NBA.
All right. So earlier this week, they released a new All Star Game format, which I wanted to bring up because I thought it was pretty interesting. They're coming out with a three-team round robin tournament. It's set up with two USA teams and one international team. So the two teams will play. each other, and then the other two teams will play each other, and then the two that didn't play each other will play each other, and then
Do you know how the US teams are split?
I do not know for sure. I don't. I think it's like a
Because I
draft
wondered
format.
if, okay, so it's like the normal format, just they're adding international then.
Yeah, and then I think international might even be a draft style.
That is that's a fun format. A lot of people have wanted something like this for a while. I think the fact that three teams are in it makes it even more interesting. I think the real question becomes how hard are they going to try in these games? Is it going to be 4 games of boring playing? Maybe. But at the end of the day, the All-Star games tend to have some pretty fun moments, like when Steph Curry shoots from half court, fun little things like that. So I don't know. It'll be fun to watch. Hopefully it brings in a bit more viewership.
But note, the two highest round robin teams go into a championship game. I don't know if there's a trophy involved.
Oh yeah, that could be. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there'd be a trophy or money or something. Um, Arguably the biggest news, Steph Curry is parting ways with Under Armour. I looked into this a little bit and it sounds like Curry just wanted to kind of go into a independent route and Under Armour felt like it was in their best interest to maybe move away from Curry. Maybe that's because he's going to retire soon and he costs a lot of money, but this is interesting because I can't think of another Under Armour athlete aside from like Dwayne the Rock Johnson other than Curry.
I think this is a big move for Under Armour because really Curry probably brings in a lot of sales. I would think for their company.
I would agree. But you also have to ask the question, how much does it cost to keep him?
Right.
I have seen it reported that he might sign with Nike. In fact, he was wearing Kobe's before the game, but he then switched to his Curry's, and he actually has another Curry shoe dropping before the deal ends. So I personally believe he's just going to stay independent at least for a year or two. But it would be interesting to see if he signs with someone else in the future. Speaking of Steph Curry, he tied Michael Jordan's record of 40 plus point games after the age of 30, and the tie was 44 of those. And he did this by scoring 49 points. It seems like every other day people are saying Curry is washed, and occasionally he'll have like a 10-point game, and then out of nowhere he'll drop a 40 bomb.
I saw the other day he only had 9 points.
Yeah. You know, I was looking at that list, and I don't think LeBron was even in the top 10, which was a bit surprising.
Yeah, I don't really see LeBron as a big scorer. He's usually in the high 20s, low to mid 30s range.
I think it helps that Curry shoots threes because he can score more points that way, but at the same time, he gets very little free throws.
Yeah, I was gonna say Curry takes a lot more threes and makes a lot more threes than LeBron, which does help overall.
Yeah. I still think it's impressive though, and I think it's yet another stat that makes you wonder, should Steph Curry be in people's top fives?
I think he is a top 2 point guard all time. I don't know about top five player all time quite yet.
I think after he retires, we might see those conversations come out a bit more. But again, I think it depends how you defined your top five. Like, do you find greatness as like stats, or do you define it as how much they brought to the game? Because I think those are two different things. And I don't think anyone's going to deny that Curry changed the game more than a lot of people.
Curry really changed between him and Ray Allen. They really changed the way the 3 point line is viewed. I think a lot of people started shooting more threes after Curry and Ray Allen.
Yeah. And this even goes into the college level, high school, street ball. I mean, when I was a kid watching Steph Curry, I started shooting threes a lot more. Did I make them? Sometimes. But yeah, he definitely has a big influence. One other thing that I thought was interesting. The Pistons are the top of the East.
Playing really basketball, I saw that 2 years ago they actually were on like a 10 game losing streak, and I think it was 2 years ago from yesterday or the day before, and then they actually are on a 10 game winning streak right now. So that's a pretty big turnaround for the Pistons.
Yeah. I think a lot of their young players are really good. Um, Obviously the coaching staff has been good too. You know, the East is arguably the weaker conference, so maybe that helps. But regardless, it is crazy to see them on top. And I will say, it helps that, you know, the Celtics are injured, but still, good for them, honestly. I wish them the best. Jalen Brown's fake hair. You know we had to talk about it. I I've seen maybe 4 or 5 clips now where his head hits an opponent's jersey and it leaves a black stain from what is presumably his fake hair. The fact that this has happened so many times is honestly alarming. And I think with his beard, he really wouldn't look bad if he just went bald. So,
Like a Birdman.
yeah. I don't get it. Like, I feel like you gotta go bald at that point, man.
Yeah, you're rubbing your fake hair off on other players.
You know, it happens once or twice, that's one thing. But I feel like it's gonna happen again too. I don't know. I
Yeah,
just thought I'd throw that in there.
I feel like they're just too afraid to go bald too early.
I feel like he could pull it off though.
Yeah, I think he's got a really good beard to pull it off, like you said earlier.
Yeah, I think having a beard helps if you're gonna go bald. All right, next up, Cooper Flagg becomes the second player ever aged 18 or younger to score 20 plus with 0 turnovers. The only other player to do this was Kobe Bryant. You know, I think people forget how young he is. And I think he showed a slow start, but I think he shows a lot of promise in the future.
He could be a good player. I mean, like you said at the beginning, at a slow start, I thought VJ Edgecombe was going to be the rookie of the year. How good he started out and how poorly Cooper Flagg started out. But honestly, Cooper Flagg can elevate his game throughout the season. I think he could probably be a top two, top three vote getter for Rookie of the Year and possibly an MVP player in the next couple of seasons.
Yeah. I do wonder how well the Mavs fit his play style though. Because I saw going into the draft, he was getting compared to people like Anthony Davis. So the fact that Anthony Davis is on his team, I almost wonder if they're kind of competing for the same role within that system. And, I wonder if that's going to hurt him. And I know Anthony Davis has been battling injuries still, but assuming he's healthy, I do wonder ultimately how that's going to play out and if he's going to have to change his play style. I know at one point they had him playing point guard, right?
Yeah, I did see that. I don't know why they're doing that. I mean, I know Kyrie Irving's out, but I
Right.
don't understand that.
Yeah, I don't know. it seems like maybe they're playing around with different things to kind of see where he fits. So that'll definitely be something worth following. And I hope that he can continue to build off of this momentum. Moses Moody had 7 first quarter threes and a career high 32 points against the Pelicans. Now, I will say the Pelicans are one of the worst teams in the league this season. I think a lot of it is they're a young team, so they could get better. But Moses Moody is not a player you think of, especially on that team, to go out there and score 7 threes. Now, don't get me wrong, he is a good 3-point shooter, but he's good for 2 or 3 a game. This honestly blew my mind when I heard about this.
Where Curry only had 9 points too. So it's good to see that other people on the team can step up when Curry can't get it done on his end. When Curry's having a bad game, the rest of the team can step up and help win the game.
Yeah, and I really feel like even when Curry's having a bad game, he's still probably likely to draw 1 or 2 defenders away because he has, in my opinion, some of the best off-ball movement of anyone in NBA history. So teams constantly have to double team him, which, makes his teammates' job a lot easier. And it helps when you have someone like Draymond Green to set screens. I've thought for a long time in terms of screens, I think the Warriors are one of the best teams at utilizing it. Although I will say Draymond maybe gets away with a couple moving screens at times. But really, that's just a foul that's not called.
Yeah, I think the Warriors could be a really dominant team like the Thunder if they had a bigger big man.
I, they're just afraid to get a good center. I don't know. And weirdly, it works at times. Like they play double team on big men and they shut them down. I believe during the playoffs last year, they held Sengun. I think they held him to like 15% from like layup range. So, they get the job done. But yeah, I agree. I think if they get a center, I could see Curry winning another championship, to be honest. LeBron got sent to the G League to practice during his injury. It was only for a couple days, but as a result, Bronny started for the Lakers. However, last night, LeBron made his debut, making him the first player to ever play 23 seasons in the NBA. First of all, I want to say the fact that he was even signed to the G League is crazy to me. Even if it was just recovery, that in my mind is like insane that someone of that caliber played in the G League technically. But the 23 seasons thing, that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they sent him to the G League because the players aren't as like built like the NBA players. They aren't quite up to pace on NBA play. So LeBron kind of had like a step back on recovery before he went to actual practice. He got into full NBA game speed. Um, and to touch on the 23 seasons, I mean, in my opinion, that adds to his legacy. Nobody's ever touched 23 seasons. His longevity is probably the best out of any player.
Yeah, and I do wonder if bringing him to the G League somehow improves the G League players' morale. Like, I wonder if that was a tactical route to maybe boost their play. I don't know.
Very well could be.
Another thing is that the Pacers have been struggling without Halliburton. They have the worst record in the NBA this season after making the finals. Some people seem to think that they're tanking. I think maybe that's somewhat true. However, I think something that people don't think about is they have a lot of injured players, not even just Halliburton. They also lost Miles Turner.
Yeah, I hate to see how far the Pacers have fallen since the finals. But I would like them to, if they are trying to tank, I'd like to see them to continue to tank, get Halliburton a good player to help him next season. I know they got Benedict Mathurin. He's a pretty good player, but I'd like to see
It
him.
seems like they might pick up a center.
Yeah, I'd like to see him pick up a center. I mean, Pascal Siakam, he's a decent big, but they need a true center, in my opinion.
I think he could easily move to power forward. And I'm not too worried about this, honestly. I think with how many injuries they have and the fact that this season didn't even need to be a good season, I'm not worried about it really. And then lastly, Denis Abdijai, how do you say his name?
I have no
Abdijah?
idea how to say it.
Well, anyways, the Wizards player currently improved from 16.9 to 25.8 points per game.
Yeah, he's currently in the running for most improved.
Hope that he keeps it up so I can hear the announcers pronounce his name, so I can learn how to say it. All right, we got a couple injuries to report. So Wimbenyama has a left calf strain. I believe is reported to be back fairly soon. Giannis has a groin injury, and Steph Curry re-aggravated an ankle injury. He is day by day. Lastly, I think we'd like to talk about the NBA Cup because I don't think a lot of people know how the NBA Cup works.
In my eyes, it is a little confusing, but basically, the NBA Cup is the tournament in the middle of the season, and it consists of two different rounds: the group play and the single elimination knockout tournament round. So all 30 teams are divided into six groups of five. This is based on their play style, based on how they played last season, I do believe. So they play four group stage games, and the winner of each group moves on to the knockout tournament, as well as the two wildcard teams, which is the team with the best record in each conference that didn't win a group. And the knockout stage features single elimination games, which will ultimately end in the final championship, where the players and the knockout tournament can actually win money off of these games.
Yes, and I believe the champions win a little over $500,000 per player.
Yep,
So, I mean, there's definitely an incentive there to try. Maybe not so much for the superstars, but the bench players, $500,000, that'll go a long way.
that's more than I'll ever see.
Well, maybe after this podcast, we'll make it big. You never know. Maybe we'll get Stephen A. Smith on here.
Oh, that would be perfect.
He did. I was going to talk about this later in our next segment, but I'll say it now. He has been removed from ESPN Countdown. Honestly, not that surprising. I know lately he's been really getting into like politics and talking about running for president. So, and he's always been love him or hate him kind of guy. So I'm not too surprised that they parted ways with him.
Anyways, continuing on with the in season tournament.
You have no thoughts on Stephen A?
I mean, he's got some hot takes, like some super hot takes. I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
if I'd even
I would
consider
agree.
him a good NBA analyst. I mean, he had some good takes, but he also had some super hot takes.
Hey, I will say though, he has more college points than LeBron. So
Love him or
say
hate
what you
him,
will.
he was a pretty funny guy.
Yeah, he was funny. Um, Now let's talk about the standings of the NBA Cup.
So in the East Group, Group A, the Raptors are leading the group with the Wizards and the Pacers being tied at the bottom. In Group B, you got the Pistons and the Magic tied at the top of the group with the 76ers and the Nets at the bottom. The Bucks in Group C are leading the way, and with the Hornets being in last. And then in the West for Group A, we got the Timberwolves in first, with the Kings and the Jazz being placed in last place. Uh, the Lakers and the Clippers are tied in first place for Group B, and with the Mavericks and the Pelicans being tied in last place. For Group C, it's a five-way tie between the Nuggets, Rockets, Spurs, Trailblazers, and the Warriors, with them each having a game apiece, 1-1.
Which doesn't surprise me. Going into this, I knew that group was going to be one of the hardest groups.
Yeah, it's a pretty good group. I mean, with all those teams being healthy, I mean, you got Jokic, you got Durant, Wemby, you got a lot of young players on the Blazers. The Warriors, they got a good team when they're healthy.
Yeah. Um, and interestingly, Darvin Ham remains undefeated in NBA Cup games. He is 16-0. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but he left the Lakers and then came back, right?
I don't believe so. I think JJ Redick is still the coach.
Who does Darvin Ham coach for now?
Uh, Darvin Ham is on. He's an assistant coach on the Bucks,
Okay.
and the Bucks won both their games.
The Bucks won both games. Okay. So that means he went undefeated the year that they won, and then he has two from the Bucks, and that's it.
Yeah,
Okay. I don't know if being an assistant coach should count, but it's certainly an interesting stat nonetheless. I wouldn't be surprised if teams hire him for the start of the season and then fire him just to win the NBA Cup. For some reason, he's really good at winning the NBA Cup. Now we're going to move on to our last main segment of the day, which is just random and funny things that we learned about this week. So first of all, Shohei Ohtani wins his fourth MVP, and this is second most all time behind Barry Bonds' seven. I think Shohei could finish his career with more than seven. It's hard to say, obviously. But either way, this is really impressive. I think most people would agree that Shohei, in terms of like overall package, is maybe the greatest baseball player of all time. Because the only other player that could pitch and hit was Babe Ruth. But I think a lot of people would consider Babe Ruth's pitching to be a little lackluster, especially in terms of, how baseball was different back then. What do you think?
honestly, I think Shohei can break Barry Bonds' record. He's only 31 years old, and he's won four MVP since 2020, I think it is, or was it 2019? I don't remember. But I mean, um, if he's got four in that amount of time, he's very likely. I
And he
mean,
might
that
have
was
won more. If he wasn't on the Angels, he might have won.
yeah. I think if he keeps up his play, and with him being on the Dodgers, he'll definitely win a couple more and potentially break that record.
I don't usually watch MLB, but I watched some of the playoffs and all of the finals and or World Series, I suppose. And it was very fun to watch. And it's honestly crazy to watch someone be able to pitch and hit like he does. But yeah, that's enough glazing of him, I suppose. He deserves it though. He deserves it. One thing I was wondering is, do you think the MLB needs a cap?
Um, I don't know. I mean, in a way, when you think about it, the Dodgers they bring in probably the highest income out of any team. I saw Shohei, they had his contract paid off just this year alone on sales, jersey sales, um, concessions. And then if you go to like the Reds, they're not a very
And
high
Japanese
market.
viewership.
Yeah, and the Reds, they aren't a very high viewed team or have many people buy jerseys, I wouldn't think, compared to the Dodgers. So the Reds are at like a disadvantage. You think of, the lower teams like who was it that had, it's like the White Sox, I think it was, wasn't it? They had the least amount of wins last season. Not this season, but the season prior.
Might have been.
So like those teams are at a disadvantage, but I don't know.
I mean, I saw a graph and I wish I had it saved. It showed like the amount of money teams spent, and then it kind of showed like how well they did within the playoffs and stuff. And there is some teams that are like way at the bottom that made the playoffs. So it kind of seems like to some extent teams just aren't willing to spend money. So does there need to be a cap space or cap limit? Maybe, and maybe it should be set pretty high. But I also think teams are just not willing to spend money, and I think the Dodgers are. I don't know.
I could
It's an
definitely see that.
interesting topic.
And I feel like with you bringing in better players, you're also probably going to bring in more money. So, like if the Reds were to sign Shohei, they're probably going to get more people watching, more sales. So, I mean, yeah, the teams have potential to make more money if they spend more money.
Yeah, it really is a risk reward thing. But I do think there is a little bit of competitive fairness because again, there is some teams that have more money to spend. But I don't know. It's something I think worth looking into. Um, but I have a feeling we won't see any changes at least within the next 2 years. That's my guess. All right, next interesting story is that Grace women's basketball team broke a college scoring record, and this applies to all college, so NCAA, D1, D2, whatever. The scoring record that they broke, let's see, they scored 172 points. But I think what's even more impressive is they went 40 for 44 from free throws, which is 90%.
It's a lot of free throws taken, but if you think about it, that's only 40 of those 172 points. So that means they had
Yeah,
132 points outside of free throws, which is a pretty good game in my opinion.
pretty good. Yeah, I would agree.
Well, for them breaking the scoring record, I guess it's a little better than pretty good.
And honestly, I have no clue if they're like even remotely in the March Madness contention or if they just beat up on a really bad team. But either way, congratulations to them. That is a very impressive team effort. All right, next thing. I don't know if you saw this, but a Texas State trooper was relieved of game day duty for bumping into a South Carolina player and confronting him. Did you see that clip?
Saw that clip. It was interesting. I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily on purpose from on the players' side.
To me, it looks like the cop almost bumps into the guy and then gets very mad. I don't know. It was a weird situation. I just thought it was worth bringing up because you don't hear about stuff like that very often. All right, next, we got Pittsburgh's women's basketball team loses 69 to 63 against D3 Scranton. Scranton was given a 0.1% chance to win. Yeah, I mean, that's crazy, honestly. Good on them. That probably felt really good.
Yeah, I wonder if that's one of their biggest wins in program history because only a 0.1% chance.
I would imagine it probably is. Interesting. And then our last bit of news before we move on to our special segment of today is that England qualified for the World Cup going 8 and 0 while allowing 0 goals in their group. Now, their group is arguably not super strong, but it certainly wasn't terrible. And you would think that they would score at least 1 or 2 goals because, when you're trying to qualify for the World Cup, it seems like those bad teams suddenly become good. And it ends up where a lot of games end up being like 4 goals to 3, and that's how you win. So the fact that they allowed 0 goals is crazy to me. And I saw that some of their games they scored, I think, like 5 goals. Yeah, I mean they've been chasing the World Cup for a couple years now and been super close. So who knows? This might be the start of something big. I mean, you know how hard it is to prevent goals. When me and you played soccer in high school. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Through 8 games. I mean, that's nuts. Going 8 games and allowing 0 goals. I mean, I don't know who their opponents are, but you, I feel like you rarely see a team go that many games in a row without allowing a single goal.
Yeah. I'm actually going to look up the group. It looks like they played Serbia, Albania, Latvia, and Andorra. So I mean, not any like super big name teams, but I know that Serbia is usually decent. Either way, though, that is incredibly impressive. Okay, and now we are going to move on to our last segment, the special segment for today, which is the NBA name teams. So you guys will have to let us know in the comments whose team is funnier, would win in an actual game, or whatever. Just let us know maybe what teams you would have come up with. One thing to note is when we picked a player, it then became unavailable to the other person. All right, so I think we'll start. Nick, who did you pick as your point guard?
For my point guard, I took World B. Free. I know he's a pretty popular guy, but you got to take a funny name, and that's a pretty funny name. I mean, I don't think of anybody having another name like that. Like, what's your baby's name? I know he changed his name, but
I wouldn't consider it super funny, but it is definitely one of the most fun names to say, you
it'd be
know?
like it's like a random name, not like a funny name.
Yeah. And for my point guard, I picked Fat Lever. Again, a somewhat well-known player, but I mean, you gotta go with it. A guy named Fat, come on now. That's just too good to pass.
Shooting guard. I took a guy I've never heard of him before, but uh, his name is Chubby Cox.
Yeah. Well, um, yeah, I wish I would have got that. I just didn't see him. I got a guy I've never heard of. His name is Trevelin Queen. And the reason I picked this is because, it is a kind of funny and unique name, but it kind of makes me think of traveling queen. So I like to imagine he's like constantly getting traveling violations. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty good name for my shooting guard.
For my small forward, I took a current NBA player. A lot of people probably know him. His name is Grady Dick.
I see that your players are kind of themed. These some of them.
Not by choice. They just have funny names. I mean,
Ah, fair
Chubby
enough.
Cox is funnier than Grady Dick, but
Yeah, that's fair. All right. For my small forward, a man who needs no introduction. if you have followed basketball at all. If you don't follow basketball very heavily, you're probably not going to know who this is because he didn't really play much. But if you know, you know. For my small forward, I took,
Troy Dan, you know.
yeah, if you watch Troy Dan, you would know. The legend, Isaac Bonga. Need I say more? Bonk your bongos for Bonga.
For my power forward, I just decided to go with a guy. I mean, he was kind of popular. He was on the Rockets, and
He actually was a good player.
he's a pretty good
He
player.
actually has some crazy dunks too. Like if you look up highlight reels,
Yeah, I think I picked this name because it's kind of weird. He only has one name that I know of. Nene,
he's Brazilian, isn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah, Nene. And I think he had a decent Olympic career. All right, for my power forward, I picked a player I also have never heard of. And his name, Jamorko Pickett. Honestly, I what more could you want from a name?
Jamorko Pickett Pocket.
Yeah, I'm sure he's good at getting steals. All right, now for sinners.
For my center, I took the legend that played on the Cavs and the Celtics. You know, one of the tallest players of all time, but not the tallest player of all time, Taco Fall.
Left the league way too soon.
Yeah, I wish we could have seen a little more out of him.
Taco Fall was a fun player. At that height, though, they rarely stay healthy. So it is what it is. Um, my guy's actually kind of similar to Taco Fall, though he's got a bit more playing time. Bull. Now you may know his father, Manute Bull, and in his genius, he decided I'm gonna name my son Bull, and because of that, he has made my team.
Manute Bowl, they didn't actually know his real age.
That's true. And actually, Bull is actually pretty fun to watch. Like he plays almost like a point guard for how tall he is.
He's almost like a Slenderman point guard.
Yeah, he looks like a My Heart character out there. All right, now we're gonna move on to our sixth man.
For my six man, I didn't really know who to go with, so I just pulled the trigger on this Heat player. His name's Dragon Bender. I've seen him play early in the
I
probably
believe it's
mid.
pronounced Dragon, right?
I have no idea, but it's still a
Either
weird
way,
name.
we're gonna call him Dragon,
Yeah,
and it is such a cool name. I like to imagine he just like controls dragons.
I mean he played in the mid 2010s. I don't know how long he really lasted in the league, but still a cool
Yeah,
name.
I don't know. And for my sixth man, if you're thirsty, if you're hungry, he's got you covered. OJ Mayo. Look, his name incorporates food and drink, mayonnaise and orange juice. And yet somehow it comes together and sounds pretty cool, in my opinion. I think he's going to be a great player off the bench for me. Arguably, probably should be starting.
Is a food?
Hmm? Well,
Do,
I would consider it more food than a drink, even though it is kind of liquefied. The ingredients, although I guess you could argue the same thing for orange juice, huh? Because oranges aren't liquid.
I feel like there's a fine line between food and condiments.
That's fair. The more I think about it, the more my analogy breaks down. And honestly, I'm kind of sad now. I might have to edit that out, but that's okay. I'll leave it in. I want everyone to know that I'm just human, all right? We all make mistakes. But OJ Mayo, he doesn't make mistakes. He gets the job done. All right, now for our coaches. This was hard.
For my coach, you know, did you know that did you know that paper beats rock? That's why I went with
I
Tree
did know that.
Rollins because he's going to be better than the Rock to our team. He's going to make
Yeah,
this team
picking
the best team.
picking coaches was very hard. There's not a lot of coaches with weird names. Hence, my coach comes from an era when I was not alive. I believe he coached in the 50s. My coach is Cotton Fitzsimmons. And there it is, guys. The NBA funny name teams. However, we have a couple honorable mentions. First of all, we have Meta World Peace. You know he had to be on there somewhere. And God Sham God. Honestly, they easily could have fit on anyone's team. It's unfortunate they didn't make the cut. Well, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah, I think we finished that segment.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments what topics you want us to cover. If you have any suggestions, or if you think we did a terrible job or a good job at something, let us know. Um, we we will take your criticism and use it to make the podcast. Because honestly, we just want this podcast to be fun for us and then fun for you guys. So we won't be offended. We just want to improve it. So yeah, let us know. And I guess we will see you on the next episode, which is a Thanksgiving special. And a reminder, please check out our sponsor if you need anything to do with, what is it?
Moving or junk removal. Lynn Junk Removal has it all.
Yeah. So, yes. And we are very thankful for the sponsorship. But yeah, definitely check them out if you need any sort of service. All right, that's gonna do it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you guys later.